ICE has arrested the Palestinian leader of Columbia University's anti-Israel protests, Mahmoud Khalil. Many people think this is a violation of free speech under the First Amendment. Others think that they're perfectly entitled, this administration, to start deporting those who openly supported Hamas. What do you say about this?
I think that was one of the most courageous acts of moral conscience that we've seen in the U.S. in many years. And it outraged the
students just shouting and yelling outside. It's not that courageous. Rabbi Shmuley, an attack on free speech, many have said that. What do you say to that?
Deport him now, because he's not promoting free speech. He's promoting incitement to violence.
It is quite rich to hear Rabbi Shmuley. He's pretty much a three-trick pony. He's either interrupting, or he's lying, or he's smearing people.
This is what we call classic anti-Semitism.
You think your narrative is made up of facts?
I see you as the modern-day followers of the Nazis.
Aaron, you can't seriously be saying that Rabbi Shmuley is a successor to the Nazis.
He's a Nazi.
President Trump's plan to turn Gaza into a Middle Eastern Riviera, embellished with a vivid AI video featuring Elon Musk eating hummus at the beach, has certainly divided opinion, to put it mildly. More importantly, it's kickstarted a serious debate about what happens to Gaza after the war. Arab leaders have now united around their own 5-year, $53 billion reconstruction plan that would see a temporary government of independent peacekeepers put in charge of the Strip. No Palestinians would be displaced. The problem is that neither Israel nor Hamas would be involved, and therefore neither of them is going to accept it. Israel is currently blocking aid from entering Gaza to pressure Hamas into accepting a temporary extension of the current truce. This weekend, wrongly in my view, it also cut off its supply of electricity. Well, Hamas says the second phase of the ceasefire, involving the full withdrawal of Israeli troops, should begin as agreed instead. Well, to debate all this, I'm joined in the studio by America's rabbi and author of Holocaust Holiday, Rabbi Shmuley, to the journalist and Pushback host for the Grayzone, Aaron Mate, and the Palestinian-American commentator, Omar Baddar. Welcome to all of you, and welcome to you, Rabbi Shmuley, here in London. Let me start, if I may, with you, Omar, about this. I've got to say, when I saw that Israel was yanking its power supply and fuel supply into Gaza, knowing how many innocent children have already died in Gaza during this war, many thousands, I just thought it was an act of inhumanity, which Israel doesn't need to do and shouldn't have done.
It certainly is an act of inhumanity, and one that is obviously designed not just to demonstrate dominance and bullying and increase the suffering of the people of Gaza, which has been Israel's goal for a very long time, but more precisely in this moment, to try to figure out a way out of the ceasefire in which the Palestinians get blamed in some way. And what they're trying to do is provoke a response that would then justify the continuation of the slaughter. And you have to pay attention to the fact that Israel has been violating the ceasefire over and over again. They've killed over 100 Palestinians since the ceasefire was announced. They have prevented the entry of adequate humanitarian aid, as was stipulated in the terms of the ceasefire agreement. And they're just looking for any way possible to try to fall short on their obligations to trigger some kind of response. And it's directly in response to the fact that the entire world now seems to be moving away from Israel's ethnic cleansing plan for Gaza that Trump has endorsed. You've had this Arab proposal that has come together about rebuilding Gaza, endorsed by many European nations. But Israel's eyes remain laser focused on the need to ethnically cleanse Gaza and empty it of Palestinians. They want to finish the job of this genocide. And right now, I think this is why they're pushing for these provocations.
Okay, Rabbi Shmuley, your response.
There is almost no electricity in any of the Arab world except what Israel provides Gaza. Syria has almost zero electricity. Lebanon goes through constant blackouts. Egypt, constant blackouts. Iraq is an oil superpower. They have no electricity. Israel has been extraordinarily kind to Gaza since 2006, when the monster murder terrorists of Hamas took over.
Yeah, but Israel doesn't pay, doesn't give this for free. I mean, they get paid.
Well, it's heavily subsidized, but the real question...
Well, hang on, it's not. No, to be clear, Israel gets $11 million a month for supplying the power into Gaza, which is 50% or more of the power that Gaza receives in entirety. And after October the 7th, within a couple of weeks, Israel cut by 90% the amount of power they were sending in, and they're now cutting the remaining 10% plus the fuel. So look, it's not an act of charity by Israel. They get paid significant sums of money for the energy that they supply.
Israel has a $700 billion GDP. $11 million means absolutely nothing. It is an act of charity. And the real question is, why didn't Hamas, who have been in power for 20 years, use quadruple the amount of Marshall aid that Europe used for Britain to rebuild their cities after the Second World War, Germany, to build their own power plants? Hamas stole all that money, enriched Yahya Sinwar. Do you know that Yasser Arafat's daughter was just ranked by Forbes to be worth $5 billion? This money was stolen. They should have built their own power plants. They shouldn't be dependent on Israel. This is the story of Hamas. And what I would say to my friend Omar is, if you hate Israel so much and you falsely accuse it of genocide, let's imagine for one moment that Trump says to all the Jews of Israel, 6 million, look guys, 75-year experiment of Israel, constant wars, everyone hates you, move to Florida, and Ron DeSantis is pro-Israel. And I grew up in Miami. And all 6 million decide, you know what, let's close Israel, not through any tragic means. Tell me, Omar, what then happens to the people of Gaza? Do they suddenly have liberty and democracy and freedom? No. Women are still killed in honor killings by their cousins, inspired by Hamas if they have a boyfriend. Gays are still castrated and hung in city squares. Gazans who want political freedom are granted none. There hasn't been one election since 2000. Take Israel out of the Middle East, and the Middle East and any country run by Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood, are still dumps where people have no human rights. Stop blaming Israel. You know the problem is not Israel. Here's proof. Because the countries in the Middle East, like the Abraham Accords, so we're talking Bahrain, we're talking about the UAE, we're talking Dubai, we're talking Abu Dhabi, they have brilliant economies, and they never complain about Israel, and they hate Hamas. They want to see technology. You are defending the status quo, and you want the Gazans, my innocent Palestinian brothers and sisters, to serve as nothing but bargaining chips, leverage against Israel. Why would you want them to stay in that hovel, in that dump? I have been in Gaza, have you? I was in Gaza before the war. I was there in 2001 with the Reverend Al Sharpton. It was a dump then. Why won't you allow the Gazans to have a plebiscite, to have a referendum? Let them decide where they want to live, if they can live in Jordan or if they can live in Saudi Arabia with a garden.
All right,
rather than you deciding that they should be bargaining chips against Israel.
Let me go to Aaron to respond first. Omar, I'll come back to you, but Aaron, your response to that. Piers Morgan Uncensored is now proudly independent. If you like the show, we ask for only one thing. Subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Now let's get straight to the point. Support for today's show comes from a business focused on a critical issue: prosperity. US national debt is at crisis levels, inflation has made life more expensive for everybody, and the stock market is precarious. It's enough to make anyone's financial future feel grim. So what is the solution? Well, a simple one is to opt out of the chaos and invest in something solid and reliable: physical gold and silver. And there's only one name you need to remember: American Hartford Gold. This company has earned the trust of thousands of customers with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and glowing reviews you can see for yourself. They offer an incredible range of gold and silver bars and coins that can be delivered directly to your door, or they'll help you set them up in a tax-advantaged gold IRA. First-class customer service makes the whole process simple, secure, and straightforward. American Hartford Gold is committed to getting the truth out there and giving you peace of mind in uncertain times. And if that wasn't enough, you'll get up to $15,000 worth of free silver when you make your first purchase and mention my name, Piers. So make the smart move. Call 866-692-2474 or text Piers, that's P-I-E-R-S, to 65532. That's 866-692-2474 or text Piers to 65532. All the details are in the description. Now on with the show.
There's a lot to respond to. There was an election in Gaza.
2006.
The people of Yes, and what happened
20 years ago, there was an election for 4 years.
Excuse me,
and they haven't allowed elections.
I didn't interrupt you, Rabbi. I didn't interrupt you.
Thank you.
There was an election. The people in the West Bank and Gaza voted for Hamas, and how did Israel and the U.S. respond? Not being generous to Gaza, as Rabbi Shmuley falsely claimed, putting it under an inhumane, crippling siege, depriving it of all the basics people needed to survive. Even certain types of hummus were banned from entering Gaza under Israeli rule. That's the benevolent Israeli occupation that Rabbi Shmuley wants us to believe in. The reason why Hamas turned to armed resistance against Israel on October 7th is because they tried all other means. When Palestinians launched the Great March of Return in 2018, tens of thousands of people marching peacefully they were gunned down by Israeli snipers. When Hamas leaders accepted the Arab League peace proposal of a two-state solution, accepting just 22% of Palestine, their historic homeland, Israel said they wouldn't even discuss it. So that answers the question of why Hamas has turned to armed resistance, because when they've tried to pursue the diplomatic path, Israel has ignored them. And that's the fundamental problem here. Rabbi Shmuley mentioned countries in the region that don't have electricity, whereas the other other countries thrive. Well, all those countries that Rabbi Shmuley mentioned, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, they share another thing in common with the Palestinians. They've been relentlessly attacked by U.S.-Israeli aggression for years. The Iraq War, for example. Syria, Israel's stolen the Golan Heights, is currently stealing more territory today. Lebanon, Israel invades in 1982, kills tens of thousands of people, occupied it for many years, recently undertook a new round of massacres. So if Rabbi Shmuley cared about the people of the region, and all Israel apologists, what they would simply do is say, for the first time in our history, we're actually going to accept the right of Palestinians to have their own land, not come up with these fantasies of ethnic cleansing, which Israel has tried to do since its founding in 1948. Say, we're actually going to recognize the rights of Palestinians to have self-determination, which everybody in this world has. And the reason why they don't accept that is because they're a Jewish supremacist state founded on this idea that Jews are superior, have a biblical right to all this land, and that's why they're pursuing their current path.
All right, but Aaron, let me ask you this. All right, but Aaron, on this issue of power, for example, electricity, I've explained how the process works. So Israel supplies more than half of Gaza's power. They get $11 million a month from the Palestinian Authority, which is gained from tax revenue from Palestinians. So it's a quid pro quo, if you like. But as we look forward here, my question, and I think it's a perfectly good one from Rabbi Shmuley there, is Hamas were given billions of dollars. Over $6 billion it's reported to have been given. And they could have gone one of many ways, right, with that money. They could have built a more prosperous Gaza if they wanted to. But instead, they spent or squandered that money on effectively building a terror network amongst the civilian population and then unleashing hell on October the 7th against the people of Israel. What they didn't do was make Gaza self-sufficient for energy or water or anything else. And my question would be, well, why didn't they? And as a result of that, what's your view of what's now happened?
Well, my answer is they were not allowed to. Israel subjected Gaza under Hamas's control to a criminal blockade, preventing the very reconstruction materials that Gaza would need to build electricity. They bombed Gaza's power plants, took it offline. They've destroyed the water infrastructure well before October 7th. The basics that Gazans need to live have been denied to them. An Israeli minister famously said, we're going to put the people of Gaza on a diet, by which he meant we're going to allow in just enough food so that people can survive without a full-blown starvation crisis, but they're going to be hungry. So if you want to know why Gaza has not built up the infrastructure that it needs to survive, the answer is the Israeli occupation. Even before October 7th, the UN was warning that within a few years, Gaza would not be livable because of the inhumanity of the siege. So there's your answer. You can criticize Hamas. There's plenty to criticize there. My friends who live in Gaza are not fans of Hamas. They would love to have somebody different. But I'm not going to hold occupied people accountable for the crimes of their occupiers. And unless you understand that Gaza has been subjected to a criminal blockade as part of one of the world's longest running and cruelest military occupations in the world, we're not going to be able to resolve this conflict.
Right, and Rabbi Shmuley, I mean, the clear reality, surely, is that unless you afford Palestinians the same basic human rights as their Israeli neighbors, you are never going to have peace in that region, ever. Why would you? Why, if one group of people, millions, are deprived the same basic fundamental human rights across a border as their neighbors, why would they not always want to resist that?
First of all, they were granted complete human rights. Israel enacted a total and complete military and civilian withdrawal from Gush Katif, Gaza, 2005. My children were some of the last, even though we're Americans, last children to actually plant trees on a Jewish holiday. They were cut down by Hamas later because all of this was used, everything was used in order to attack Israel. My issue with Aaron is that there's a difference between opinion and fact. Aaron, I say respectfully, I think that you have really permanently undermined your credibility by just such a stream of fabrication that it defies imagination. Did you really just say that the Palestinians only got 22% of the mandated Palestine? You know it's the exact opposite.
No, I didn't
you,
say
no,
that.
No,
Excuse me.
You said I shouldn't
didn't say
interrupt
that.
you, so you won't interrupt me. Thank you.
I didn't say that,
I appreciate your respect.
Well, he's disputing you said it.
Your
Well, hang
respect.
on,
You
hang
did
on.
say it.
Well, what did he say? Hang on, let's just clarify.
I said that the Arab League offered Israel a huge compromise for Palestinians, in which Palestinians would accept just 22% of their historic homeland.
Okay, let's go to the
West Bank
facts.
and
Let's go to the facts.
And get a
please.
Palestinian
The facts are,
state there.
no, you won't
Israel
interrupt me,
wouldn't
please,
even
because I
accept
didn't
the
interrupt you,
Palestinian
please.
compromise
Listen,
they're hell-bent on
why don't you
occupation.
finish interrupting me, and when you're finished, then I'll continue. Go ahead. Finish interrupting me.
I answered your question.
Thank you. So let me
Arab
continue.
League
Let me
offered
continue.
Israel-
Everyone knows that Winston Churchill actually wrote that on a Sunday afternoon, he created the nation of Transjordan. He was the colonial secretary. He cut off 80% of the Balfour Declaration 1917, biblically mandated Palestine, and he gave it to Jordan. It was a reward for people who don't live there, the Hashemites. He brought King Abdullah and his brother King Faisal. Faisal was kicked out of Syria. Then Abdullah was killed in Jordan. Somehow the Hashemites, continue there till this very day. They're not native Jordanians. You and I both know that. They cut off 80% of the Jewish homeland and created Transjordan. That is a fact, Winston Churchill. Now let's go on. Even then, with the 20% left, no, you're interrupting me again because you don't want to hear facts. But you're going to hear these facts, and then when I finish, I won't interrupt you. How about that?
Okay,
let's have a civil dialogue. 1936, you say that in 1936, the Peel Commission launched by the British was because of Arab violence before there was even a Jewish state. It started with an Arab blockade and a boycott, and then it became full violence. So they sent the Peel Commission, and the Peel Commission divided the country into two, and the Arabs rejected it. Then November 1947, in the Queen's Museum, which I drive by whenever I land in LaGuardia Airport or JFK, that was the UN headquarters. They voted again a partition plan where the Jews got a tiny bit of that 20%. The Arabs rejected it, launched two wars, 1947, 1948. 1956, Israel withdrew completely from the Sinai, which they conquered. 1967, after they conquered everything that we're debating right now, Moshe Dayan, the defense minister, went to the Arabs and said, we want to give it all back. They went to Khartoum and they responded with the three no's. No to recognition, no peace, and no legitimacy. These are all facts. You can destroy your credibility as a scholar if you wish. Finally, Ehud Olmert offered them 96% of the West Bank, and they rejected it. And then Bill Clinton, who we Jews don't really consider a great friend of Israel, wrote in his memoirs that he told Arafat, I am a failure, and you are the reason I'm a failure. We gave you everything. Now, finally, one final point. Well, Piers, when you ask me a very valid question, why should the Palestinians not resist when they're given full rights? There are no soldiers in Gaza. Israel dismantled its own communities. They used their soldiers to break down houses of my wife's cousins. And then Aaron says there was a blockade and they could build anything. How did they build an underground network larger than the London Tube that I just took to get here? If there was a blockade, the London Tube is pretty impressive. Do you know that Hamas used the hundreds of billions of dollars they got not to build one bomb shelter, not one electricity plant, which could have answered Pierce's issue about they used it all to build a terror network for their fighters and then use babies and and you say about Jewish supremacy. I want to say it unequivocally with a yarmulke and a beard. I believe as a Jew that God loves every Palestinian child as much as a Jew. And everyone that died is because of Hamas, Hamas.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, Omar, what do you respond to that?
Sure. I mean, first, it is quite rich to hear Rabbi Shmuley complain about anybody interrupting. He's pretty much a three-trick pony. He's either interrupting, or he's lying, or he's smearing people
ad hominem. Are you really going to get into ad hominem this early in the debate? Do you really have to personalize it? Deal with the facts, please.
There's the first trick.
Stop the ad hominem attacks.
Trick.
Go ahead.
He's demonstrating it.
Please don't do the ad hominem,
He's demonstrating his first trick for you right now. In fact, Piers, frankly, if your audience watching at home were playing a drinking game in which they took a shot every time he either lied or interrupted, half of your audience would be dead before the program is ended.
This is just ad hominem. Do you know facts or not? Do you want to debate fact or do you want to insult me?
Are you going to keep interrupting? Are you going to keep complaining about interrupting and then do your own interrupting? Are you just going to demonstrate your hypocrisy to everyone on television?
Here we go. Hypocrisy, liar. We know what you think about Jews. Debate the facts. Forget the evil me and debate the facts.
Unbelievable level of hypocrisy. You are demonstrating your hypocrisy right now by continually interrupting when you don't like what you're hearing.
Try and stop.
Let me Yeah, I'll set the insults, if that's even possible with dealing with people like you. Now, Rabbi Shmuley actually fully understands that the reason why there's no electricity in Gaza is because Israel... Can you be quiet? Can you be quiet and let me finish what I have to say? Rabbi Shmuley knows extremely well that the reason why there is no electricity in Gaza is because Israel bombs the infrastructure in Gaza and then puts Gaza under siege and does not allow Palestinians to rebuild their own power plants. They've created a situation of dependence where Gaza cannot survive on its own economically. It has to depend on Israel, and that is by design because Israel wants to be able to shut off the electricity at any point. Rabbi Shmuley knows this, but he tries to play on the uninformed audiences. He takes them for fools and hopes that they won't be able to see through the idiocy that he's actually demonstrating right now.
So now I'm an idiot.
Anybody with a functioning
Come on, any
brain
other insults?
will understand
Have you
very
got a
well
thesaurus
that
in
the
front of you?
reason why Gaza is not free is because Israel prevents it
Google
from being
more
free.
personal insults. You can't deal with a single historical fact that I said, so you've called me an idiot, hypocrite, a liar. Let me tell you something. See, this is what we call classic anti-Semitism.
You think your narrative is made up of facts? Are you kidding me?
I quoted to you the Peel Commission, the UN, the Omer deal. You cannot respond to a single one. So what do you have to do? Ad hominem, ad hominem, ad hominem. Deal with me as a person and try to suppress your hatred for Jews. Thank you.
Yes, quiet down. Yeah, again, the smear of anti-Semitism. That's the second trick. Really, if people are taking shots, I mean, try to keep track of how much alcohol they're consuming at this point. So the reason why there has not been a Palestinian state, and by the way, if you're going to pull up Bill Clinton, that's fine. By all means, why don't you try pulling up Jimmy Carter, who's been very clear about the fact that the reason why there has not been a resolution to this conflict is because Israel insists on maintaining an illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories and denies Palestinians any freedom. And so you hear Shmuley here claiming that Israel allows Palestinians to be completely free and have full rights, but that is belied by every single major human rights organization in the entire world. And so Shmuley was basically saying that you have to believe him and Israeli propagandists when it comes to the issue of human rights, instead of believing our own eyes, instead of believing major human rights organizations, and actually documented facts of what is unfolding on the ground. And that is that Palestinians have no freedom, no dignity, no opportunity, all due to Israel squeezing them under a brutal occupation and looking for ways to get rid of them. That is at the core of the so-called conflict.
Okay, let me ask you, Rabbi Shmuley, a different question, which is that it has been reported the Trump envoy to the Middle East is in direct talks now with Hamas. Should the White House be directly negotiating with a prescribed terror group in this way?
Well, I want to know whether the official hostage negotiator, Adam Boehler, has gone rogue, or whether these are under orders of our elected president, who has the mandate of the people, having won the popular vote, the Electoral College vote. Because what Adam Boehler said yesterday, I think it was on CNN, was shocking. He not only went rogue and started speaking to Hamas when the president had tweeted 2 days earlier, giving Hamas a binary choice: release the hostages or face hell, and every one of your fighters will be killed. And he said that he would give Netanyahu everything that he needed. The president wrote this himself on Truth Social, in order to annihilate every Hamas fighter, every terrorist dedicated to a second genocide, to a second Holocaust. Suddenly, Boehler comes along, goes behind the scenes, and by the way, Piers, may I say, he criticized my dear friend Ron Dermer, who was you probably know I was a rabbi at Oxford University for 11 years. Ron Dermer was my student president. I'm one of the people who inspired him to move to Israel. He's now chief negotiator for the hostages. He criticized Ron by name, which was very unfair. And then he said, Hamas aren't such bad people. They don't have horns. You know, it's like saying, Hitler was nice to his dog. I've heard that too. When you have a genocidal organization whose actual charter says that we are dedicated not just to killing Rabbi Shmuley and all the IDF soldiers and all the women they gang raped. I was in the killing fields of Gaza 10 days after the bodies were still there, the stench of death was still there. When he says that they don't have horns and that they're nice people, you give them a degree of legitimacy which is shocking. Imagine if people in Britain during the Second World War, knowing the Blitz, and then they found out about the extermination camps and what was done even to British prisoners of war, suddenly you heard that the Nazis aren't such bad people. In fact, I met with them and Himmler, we had tea, etc. That would be very offensive. And then he said, America is not a client state of Israel? I mean, come on. Does Adam Boehler not realize that he, as a Jewish American, is someone who Hamas also says in their charter they're going to kill? Let me quote the charter verbatim. The time will come when trees will call out and say, come, Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him. That includes Adam Boehler, includes his wife, includes his children. So when you say that these people are human, I'm sorry, there's no genocidal organization which is human. When Adam says to me, Hey, they were elected in 2000. There was an election. Adam, are you freaking kidding me? You mean if Trump decides to abolish elections in 2028, you're going to be okay with it? If he says that he's going to go in 20 years to elections, you're making a mockery of democracy. And don't tell me it was a fair election. It was an election between the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Hamas, who hates Hamas, who hasn't visited Gaza in 20 years because he would be killed, probably even more than I would. They took the Palestinian Authority candidates and they threw them off rooftops. They killed them. And by the way, I haven't heard either of you say a single word. You said about Syria. Adam, you said that Israel stole the Golan Heights.
His name's Aaron, not Aaron.
Aaron, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. It was not intentional. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. And it's a beautiful biblical name. We'll connect on that. I hope you'll forgive me. Aaron. Adam's also a nice, beautiful name, but Aaron's a better name. Good biblical name. Moses' brother. You're a high priest. Did you really tell me that Israel stole the Golan Heights? Did you really want Assad to have it while he was gassing Arab children with mustard sarin gas, with poison gas? Do you want Al-Julani? Do you want Al-Julani to have it right now? Did you watch the videos of what Al-Julani did to the Alawites over the past week? Have any of you seen a single demonstration? They took Arab men and shot them in the frickin' head, and then learning from Hamas, posted it all on Instagram and on X, and you guys haven't said one word. You know why? Because you don't really care about Arab law.
All right, well, why don't we
demonize Jews?
Why don't we let him get a word in anyways? I think Aaron has said something about this.
Syrian land because
let Aaron respond to that, because I think you have been saying things about it.
Yeah. Just a historical point. Israel stole the Golan Heights in 1967, long before Bashar al-Assad was in power. Second of all,
his father was in power.
Let him speak, please.
Okay. If Rabbi Shmuley is upset with the atrocities currently being committed, he's right, by this Al-Qaeda offshoot that now rules Syria. He should be criticizing governments like Israel and the U.S., which took credit for this former Al-Qaeda leader taking power. Netanyahu, after Assad was overthrown, gave a grand speech saying we deserve credit for this because it was our crushing of Syrian allies, Hezbollah, plus, by the way, the hundreds of Israeli airstrikes on Syria over the years and also arming insurgent groups that helped bring about Assad's fall. So if you're upset about that, Rabbi Shmuley, take it up with Netanyahu, who openly took credit for helping bring about the ouster of Assad. Now, I want to say something now. I'm not a religious person, so I can't claim to be a devout Jew. But I got to say, Rabbi Shmuley, you don't speak for me. Accusing people like my friend Omar of anti-Semitism simply because he wants the freedom of his people. It saddens me to see what people like you have done to the Jewish tradition. The suffering of my family, my great-grandparents perished in the Holocaust. They were murdered by the Nazis. And today, I have to tell you, I see you as the modern-day followers of the Nazis, supporting this mass murder campaign in Gaza, putting the people of Gaza in what even Israelis have called a concentration camp. It's the Israeli Jews of today, supported by American Jews, unfortunately, some, that are following in the footsteps of our oppressors. And I hope one day you can connect to your own humanity and the very best of your own tradition, which I believe in, to see just how horrible this modern state, this modern supremacist state, is not only for the Palestinians, but the Jewish people
Aaron,
as well.
you can't seriously be saying that Rabbi Shmuley, one of the most high-profile Jews in the world, is a successor to the Nazis.
Is a Nazi.
I mean, that's a pretty despicable.
I am saying that.
That's a pretty despicable thing to say, isn't it?
He supports the mass murder of children in a concentration camp. What else am I supposed to?
May I
People
respond
being
to that?
put under a starvation
I think you should
sea.
respond to that.
These are Nazi tactics.
Aaron,
These are Nazi tactics.
Aaron, notice I have not once offended, used ad hominem attacks against Omar or you. I have decided that I'm going to be factual. No, excuse me. You won't interrupt me. Omar started Omar started calling me a liar. He wouldn't deal with any facts. A hypocrite. He said I'm drunk on lies, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we call ad hominem, personal attacks. I've seen it whenever, and I debate everybody because I like Piers, and this is why I love this show. I'm also a free speech absolutist. The person you just called a Nazi spent the past year with his friend Ron Dermer, who was condemned by Adam Boehler because of our close relationship from my years as rabbi at Oxford. He was my student president. And Bobby Kennedy Jr., the new HHS Secretary of Health and Human Services, saving 200 Palestinian children who had cancer. Hamas would not let them go to an Israeli hospital because they would kill their families if Israeli hospitals treated them, Shaare Tzedek or Sheba Medical, all of whom agreed to take them. We had to take them to St. Jude's Hospital in Amman, and I helped get them out. And the reason why the Israeli military wanted the kids out but not their accompanying attendants is that so many of them were terrorists pretending to be an uncle, a grandfather, that's other terrorists. But I helped arrest. A few of them died. It was terrible. I think we saved 173. But I want to say something to you, Aaron, if I may, respectfully. I believe what you just said about me as a Jew, comparing me to a Nazi, will live in ignominy, respectfully, on your resume forever and ever and ever. I think you have now permanently undermined any and all semblance, iota, molecule, atom of credibility. Because if you can compare me, if you can compare me, father of 9 children, grandfather of 11, who has fought his entire life for Arab rights, who when I was the rabbi at Oxford got halal meat for all of us, including the grandson of the king of Saudi Arabia, who today is the British ambassador, the ambassador to Court of St. James, Halal ibn Bandar. The niece of the king of Jordan at the time. I have worked my entire life for Arab rights. And I will say something that I bet Omar, I'll challenge him to say it. Let me ask you, Omar, you're a Muslim, I assume? I will state unequivocally that this Nazi believes that every Arab life is absolutely equal to a Jewish life completely before God. I will also state that Islam is a great world religion that saved my people when they were kicked out of Catholic Spain by Ferdinand and Isabella of Aragon and Castile in 1492, and then King Manuel III to marry their daughter in about 1503. You know who took us in? The Muslims. That's why there are Jewish communities in Istanbul before Erdogan became an anti-Semite and invoked the Nazis. The Muslims saved us. We will never forget it. Islam, we only know about Aristotle and Plato, Socrates. The Catholic Church saw them as pagan philosophers and burned their books. It was Muslims who created the first year. So, Omar, will you make the same statement? Is Judaism as great a world religion and equal before God as Islam, yes or no?
That goes without saying. For the record, by the way, I'm agnostic. But yes, I have no trouble acknowledging the fact that.
But thank you, I appreciate that. So we're making some progress here.
Well, let me ask Omar. Let me ask you. Hang on, Omar. I want to ask you a different question. Would you endorse what Aaron said, though, that Rabbi Shmuley is a successor to Nazi?
I'm a Nazi.
Look, I'm personally, between Aaron and Rabbi Shmuley, they're both Jewish. I feel like there's more comfort in invoking that language. I personally don't really care much for Nazi analogies, but I will point out that Rabbi Shmuley is the one who invoked the Nazi analogy first in talking about Gaza. And I just want to say that if what you're doing is defending a government that is credibly accused of genocide by every major human rights organization in the world, and whose leaders
what do you mean
are
genocide?
wanted by the International Court.
Do you know the definition of genocide?
International Criminal Court.
Who coined the word genocide?
Can I finish my sentence?
Yes, please. Forgive me.
Have you ever let anybody else finish a sentence while complaining about interrupting?
Let's stop the ad hominem. I apologize. Go ahead, please.
The Israeli government is credibly accused of committing genocide in a concentration camp in Gaza. If we're talking about sectarian violence, there is no greater sectarian violence than the fact that you have people between Netanyahu talking about the Amalek, between the Israeli soldiers, celebrating this genocide on TikTok. You can read endless statements from them. If that's what you're supporting, the massacring of people in a concentration camp, you probably should be the last person to invoke Nazi analogies.
So then I am a Nazi, like Aaron
when we
said.
talk about Syria,
when we
talk about Syria, there's no question that the current government is engaged in unspeakable atrocities against Alawites and other minorities. There's no question that the previous government under Assad was also a brutal and repressive government that is engaged in endless atrocities. But none of this changes the fact that it does not allow Israel to take Syrian territory because there are atrocities being committed in Syria. And there is universal agreement under international law that the Golan Heights is Syrian territory that Israel is illegally occupying. This is simply uncontroversial. And starting to talk about random atrocities being committed in Syria as a way to justify that occupation is just an attempt to pull the wool over people's eyes. And people should be awake and aware of the fact that this is no justification.
I want to get some other stuff in.
Can I just get the genocide thing for 1 second?
Very quickly.
Omar, do you know what genocide means, the exact definition?
I do. The attempted destruction of a people in whole or in part. And every major human rights organization, Amnesty International, called it a genocide.
Is a term.
Human Rights Watch
may I
said
respond?
genocidal
Genocide
acts.
is a term that was coined by a Holocaust survivor, a lawyer named Raphael Lemkin. Geno is an ethnicity. Cide is mass murder. It is the intentional mass murder of an ethnicity. Now, if Israel was guilty of genocide, the first people they would have killed is all the Arab Muslim citizens who are defenseless, living in Nazareth, living in Jaffa, living in Haifa. And in fact, everyone thought that they may even rise up against Israel after October 7th. They are so content to be Israeli citizens, there wasn't one uprising because they love being Israeli citizens. That's the first thing. Genocide, you don't even know what it means, respectfully. I'm not saying that ad hominem, you just know what it means. Number two, if Israel is guilty of genocide, Israel has nuclear weapons. Israel could have flattened. So even according to Hamas numbers, about 47,000 people have died in Gaza since the beginning of the war. Let's assume that's, Hamas health. Let's assume they're true. Israel and Hamas both essentially say that it's about a 1-to-1. Israel even admits more than Hamas. Israel says it might be a 1-to-1.2 of combatant to civilian deaths. Do you know what Winston Churchill was guilty of in the Second World War? 1-to-4. So you'll say that was non-precision, but it's not true because Churchill bombed at night because he didn't care about how many civilians he was killing. And the Americans used a special locator. They only did precision bombing during the day. America in Mosul under President Obama. That was a 1-to-4 combatant to civilian ratio. I could go on. Israel has the lowest civilian casualty ratio in modern times. And finally, you're speaking about the most densely populated place on earth. So, given that,
no, that's not true.
Wait, let me just finish, please. Given that Saddam Hussein killed 800,000 Arabs, given that Bashar al-Assad killed 600,000 Arabs, and given that even according to Hamas, Israel killed 47,000 and half are, and every one of them was too many, by the way, they're all Hamas's fault, and half are combatants. So you're telling me the 23,000 who are only killed as they live because Hamas puts their bases, their army bases, in kindergartens and in nurseries and in hospitals, that's a genocide? That's the purpose of targeting of an ethnicity? Read about Raphael Lemkin. He was a hero. He got the 1948 anti-genocide agreement to which 183 nations are party to. And by the way, to all my Irish friends who are watching who accuse Israel of genocide, Ireland signed a document that said that if a genocide is going on, they have to accept all those people guilty of it, suffering under it, into Ireland. Do you know that Ireland hasn't taken one Palestinian refugee? You know that Britain hasn't taken, I think, like 100 refugees? If it's a genocide, why aren't you clamoring for all the nations to finally take them in? Because you don't really believe it.
Okay, let me go to...
Can I?
Well, Omar, very quickly, but I want to go to Aaron on something else, but very quickly respond.
Sure, I'll keep this very brief. First of all, the rate of the killing of civilians in Gaza is unprecedented. Yes, there are other civil wars throughout the Arab world in which more people cumulatively were killed over a period of many years, but the rate of killing Palestinian children, especially in the opening months after October 7th, they were killing 136 children per day. That is a number that is unprecedented, now leading into the tens of thousands of Palestinian children. So we are seeing a rate of killing and destruction that is actually unprecedented. And it is demonstrated not just when we talk about,
for 136 a day, your source, please? Omar, your source, please?
A program.
What's your source, please?
I'm happy to provide them all.
No, you should be able to say it on TV. Come on, don't tell me you're going to use, ChatGPT.
Yes,
don't ChatGPT debate me.
Well, I can tell you the source is the Hamas-run health authority.
Hamas is your source. Thank you.
But, and it's an important... Well, hang on. It's an important but. It's important but. Hamas's figures previously, before October the 7th, in terms of casualty numbers, have later been pretty accurate, it turned out, and accepted by Israel.
Oh, I said that. About 47,000, 1-to-1 combatant to civilian ratio, lowest in modern history.
Yeah,
it's not 1-to-1. That part is a lie as well.
But also, the key point is the 50% of the population of Gaza is under 18. So the ratio numbers don't count unless you factor in the fact that a disproportionate number of children have been killed. That is indisputable. Let me bring Aaron in on something else. ICE has arrested the Palestinian leader of Columbia University's anti-Israel protests. Many people think this is a violation of free speech under the First Amendment. Others think that given Hamas is a terror group prescribed in America, that they're perfectly entitled, this administration, to start deporting those who openly supported Hamas. What do you say about this? The guy's name was Mahmoud Khalil. He's a Palestinian refugee raised in Syria. He was the lead student negotiator for the pro-Palestinian encampment at Columbia. And Columbia, of course, became a kind of epicenter of pro-Palestinian student protests then. Many Americans were genuinely extremely offended by a lot of the pro-Hamas sentiment and insignia that was being seen on these protests, and it looks like now the Trump administration is moving on them.
Here's what you call pro-Hamas. I would just simply call anti-mass murder. That's what these brave Columbia students were protesting. And I think it's an egregious attack on free speech that a permanent resident with a green card, he's married to a U.S. citizen, she's 8 months pregnant, has been snatched from his home. He's not charged with anything. No one's indicted him for providing material support to Hamas or any other group, because this whole action is simply political. It's an attack on free speech. These students who put up these encampments on campuses last year, I think that was one of the most courageous acts of moral conscience that we've seen in the U.S. in many years. And it outraged the establishment.
A bunch of students just shouting and yelling outside. It's not that courageous. I think the point that people are making about why it was so offensive and egregious was the open, brazen support that so many of them seem to have specifically for Hamas. If you were there protesting, supporting Palestinian civilians, okay, the Palestinian people. But the moment you are directly endorsing and supporting a terror group, surely all bets are off then. Why should America allow you to remain in the United States if you're endorsing a terror group? Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on X about the arrest of Mr. Khalil, said, we'll be revoking the visas and/or green cards of Hamas supporters in America so they can be deported. Many Americans will agree with that.
Again, first of all, you have the right to free speech to support whoever you want. You can support Hamas if you want to. Now, I went to these encampments.
Well, you can't endorse terrorist activity, can you? Because that's inciting terrorism.
There was an endorsement of the right to resist military occupation, which is internationally recognized right.
Yeah, but if you endorse Hamas's behavior, you are endorsing terrorism, which is a crime, isn't it? If you promote and incite
no, it's not a crime.
Terrorism,
that's why he hasn't been charged with it.
Well, he hasn't yet.
If it's a crime, then why hasn't he been charged with it?
Let's wait and see.
He hasn't been charged with it.
Let's wait and see.
Well, he's not going to be charged with it because this is an attack on free speech.
Okay, well, Rabbi Shmuley, an attack on free speech, many have said that. What do you say to that?
Deport him now, because he's not promoting free speech. He's promoting incitement to violence. Hate speech is actually outlawed in the United States. I love the First Amendment, but you cannot incite violence for people to be attacked. Now, when they go to these encampments in Barnard or Berkeley, they're not just protesting. They're calling for intifada now. They're calling for for violence. They're calling for the murder of Jews. And they are endorsing Hamas. Aaron is being disingenuous. So many of them openly they have no shame telling the AP, telling CNN, Fox, MSNBC, that they are absolutely pro-Hamas. And intifada now is a call for violence. Incitement to violence in the age of the greatest tsunami of anti-Semitism since the Second World War, since the Holocaust, where Jewish students are harassed, intimidated, punched, beat up, kicked, spat on. We've seen it all. They're not even, you see, what October 7th did with Hamas filming their atrocities is inspire everyone else to do the same, which is why we're seeing Al-Julani kill the Alawites, and they're all filming it. They're not even worried about the ICC prosecuting them, and that's what these students at Barnard are doing. He should be deported. I understand he's married to an American wife. That breaks my heart. But he's the one who did this to himself. But Jewish students can go to university without fear of being murdered. And I would say one thing to you, Aaron, if I may. You say just 1 second, please.
No one's afraid of being murdered.
Aaron, you started. By the way, I didn't know you were Jewish. You're my Jewish brother. Nothing will change that. May I just say, I've been disappointed by many Jews since October 7th. One of the last times I did Pierce's show, I debated Mohammed hijab. One of his supporters attacked me in the Fontainebleau Hotel, one of the most famous hotels in Miami Beach, Florida, 1/3 Jewish. And he came and said Mohammed hijab, and he threatened to murder me. It was filmed, 4.5 minutes. And the Jewish owner, Jeffrey Sofer, billionaire, sued me, not him, to silence me because anti-Semitism is bad for business at the hotel. I've been disappointed by many Jews since October 7th. But no Jew, plenty of anti-Semites, no Jew has ever called me a Nazi before. And I would really ask you in the remaining time of this show, just for your own credibility, I don't care. You're off the reservation, my brother. Your credibility, this is going to stay on your Wikipedia page forever, and you're never going to live it down. So you got a couple minutes left. Say, you know what? In the heat of the moment, I overstated it. I said that a Jew, because the Nazis killed 10,000 Jews every day. They gassed 1.5 million Jews. I've gassed no Arab. I've hurt no Arab. I've defended Arab rights my whole life. So take it back, just so you'll be invited back on shows, because otherwise you're going to be labeled an off the reservation extremist. And I'd rather hear your voice.
Rabbi Shmuley,
You have just a few minutes to take it back. Just say,
excuse me.
I lost it.
Excuse me. I was responding to you invoking the Nazi Holocaust.
No, you said I'm a successor to the Nazis.
No, I'm sorry.
You know, the problem with TV is that it's forever.
In response to the, okay,
just say
if I
you're
can
sorry.
answer.
Well, I have to say, I was pretty stunned you said that, Aaron. I mean, to actually directly say he's a successor to the Nazis, given his history as a high-profile Jewish man and his family's history. I mean, that's about as an appalling an allegation you could make against anyone like Rabbi Shmuley, isn't it?
Not nearly as appalling as supporting a genocide, frankly.
And if I can answer,
names is one thing.
Well, two things can be true at once.
If I can answer,
Aaron, yeah.
He invoked the Nazi Holocaust to actually say we should not be negotiating with Hamas, who he compared to the Nazis. And my point was, if we're going to be making analogies to the Nazi Holocaust, and the fact is you have a Jewish supremacist state that believes it's superior, has more rights than the Palestinians of that land, has put the people of Gaza under a medieval siege, subjected them to mass murder, put them in a concentration camp. And in that respect, that's where the analogy to, of course, no analogy is perfect. I'm not saying that Israeli crimes are on par with that of the Nazis. Nothing compares to what the Nazis did to the Jews and other groups.
So was it fair to say he's a successor to a Nazi? I mean, seriously.
I'm saying my point was, if you're going to be invoking the Nazi Holocaust, the current successors to the Nazi legacy of supremacy and mass murder are Israel and its apologists.
Fine. Yes. Okay, I got it. So I'm a Nazi, Israel's Nazi. Aaron, wait, one second. A point of historical fact, please.
Of the student,
a point of historical fact for a moment.
Omar, I will come to you, just one second.
A point of historical fact. You keep on saying that Israel denies Gazans, Palestinians' rights. I mean, I'm just shocked by this. Again, I just want to speak fact right now. Israel has 1.9 million Arab Muslim citizens who not only enjoy every right that an Israeli has, they enjoy more rights. If Israel's an apartheid state, it's that they're actually oppressing Jews. I'll prove it easily. My sons had to go to war, even though they're Americans, because there's a draft only against Jews. Now, if you think a draft to go to war, and for me and my wife to not sleep for the past 10 months as our sons were forced to fight the Hamas terrorists in Gaza, the Hamas terrorists of Hezbollah in Lebanon, that's not easy. Every time we saw 972 code number, we couldn't sleep at night. What tore America apart in the 1960s, where it was even more divided than right now under Trump? It was the draft. It was the draft. It was the draft. It was the draft. So Arabs have complete rights. Israel is not, Gaza's not an Israeli state. What do you mean Israel denies them rights?
Rabbi
Israel
Shmuley,
withdrew. Wait 1 second, please.
Unless they're in Gaza
1 second,
or the West
please.
Bank,
I'm a historian of the Holocaust. I wrote a book called The Holocaust Holiday. When you say that Gaza is a concentration camp, let me get this straight. Have you ever visited Gross-Rosen, Mauthausen, Birkenau, Auschwitz I, Auschwitz III? Have you ever visited Buchenwald? Have you ever Bergen-Belsen? Are you telling me there are concentration camps that don't have soldiers in them? Are you telling me the SS? There isn't one Israeli soldier in Gaza ever. They only went in after October 7th because in 2006, Hamas, which you said was elected, even though we can question the election, but let's say it was legitimate. They decided to steal every dollar that came in that could have built power plants, that could have built schools and hospitals. And they built terror tunnels and they built Qassam rockets. So Israel is not denying them a single right. And to call it a concentration camp, with all due respect, is a fundamental desecration of the Holocaust and a desecration of the memory of the 6 million.
I'm not alone in that. Giora Island also called them at Baruch Kimmerling. Plenty of Israelis have called it that as well, because that's exactly what it is.
Name one Israeli. Name one Israeli.
Baruch Kimmerling. Have you heard of him?
He's a nobody. I haven't heard. Who's heard of him? Has anyone watching this heard of Baruch Kimmerling? Tell me one prominent Israeli who said that Israel are Nazis. Tell me one.
Giora Island.
Who?
Giora Island. You know who he is, right?
I have no idea who these people are. Tell me someone who actually has stature. Tell me. I mean, I'll tell you that Baruchovich said it.
All right. I will say, I think it was wrong.
There's a point
I think it was wrong to say that, Aaron. I do. I think I was incredibly surprised you said it. I just think you cannot possibly equate a bunch of Jews to the Nazis. It's just it's incomprehensible to me. Let me come to Omar for this last point. This is Trump's world vision for Gaza, the Riviera. Let's take a look to remind ourselves how Trump saw this. He reposted an AI video on Truth Social.
Bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1.
Now, it's been roundly ridiculed, that obviously, but the effect of it is exactly what I thought might happen, which is it was such an outlandish idea that Trump had that all the Palestinians would simply leave and you'd build a new Riviera there and so on, that it's forced the Arab world to come together and to come up with an alternative plan, which they now have, a $53 billion plan for the post-war reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. You know, sometimes you have to look, as I say, Trump will take things to the nth degree to force people to a negotiating table to actually get stuff done. I mean, do you see a bit of method to the madness there?
Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced, to be honest, that this kind of vision is part of the reason why other countries were pushed to come up with a plan as quickly, maybe sped it up, came up with it a little bit faster. But the only plan that you need for Gaza is for Israel to get the hell out of Gaza, and just whatever happens from there happens. It's just not Israel's business. But Piers, I don't want this segment to end without me addressing the student issue that you mentioned a little bit earlier. Because this kid, Mahmoud Khalil, has basically been smeared by the Trump administration, by Marco Rubio on Twitter, by accusing him of being a Hamas supporter and a terror supporter.
Well, is he?
This student has said nothing of the kind. He's guilty of being a part of a protest in which people are protesting genocide, and then maybe every once in a while somebody might say something that is off-putting or awful.
But how do you know he's not a Hamas supporter out of interest?
Nobody has made any allegations or presented any evidence that he has said or done anything.
You just said Marco Rubio did. You just said the Secretary of State of the United States did.
Yes, without any evidence. Without any evidence is what I'm saying. There's no evidence against him.
But they are building.
Everybody who knows
but actually, that is Rabbi Shmuley.
I have to finish this thought.
Well, that is an important point of distinction. I mean, if he's going to be deported for supporting Hamas, you do surely have to present evidence that he has supported Hamas. I don't think leading a protest group where most of them behaved peacefully and were not brazenly supporting Hamas would be enough, in my eyes, to justify what would then be surely an infringement of his First Amendment rights.
I want America to be America to be a nation of laws. I want Muslim Americans, they're of course as American as George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. The word American is infinitely
But you accept he'd have to have shown support for Hamas.
But he's not an American. That's the point. So he can be deported. His wife's American, and I hate to see them torn apart. But he made his choices.
But if the reason given by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is that he supported Hamas, it is surely in the interests of justice and fairness that there is some evidence shown to the American people that he actually did support Hamas.
There will be due process, and of course the administration and ICE will have to have evidence. That's the United States of America. But I will say that to say that these were peaceful protests,
so far
I think, just one moment please,
disappeared.
I think one of the reasons that Trump won the election, including shocking the world by winning the popular vote, was because of these demonstrations. They were anything but peaceful. People saw total anarchy. They saw our best universities, all the Ivy League universities, Brown and Harvard and Berkeley and Columbia, being burned to the ground. They saw Jewish students being spat on. We saw Jewish students, excuse me, Aaron, we saw Jewish students at Harvard being beaten to a pulp with nothing being done. And we Jews are kind of sick of it. And if you think we're just, wait, since you spoke, Aaron, so much about us being a white supremacist, you know, Israel, I'm actually American. I'm not Israeli, but I love Israel. I'm Jewish. What about America? America can't be a supremacist state either, where Jews are second-class citizens. Students who work hard to get into Harvard do not deserve to be beaten up because they wear a kippah. And I've been to these protests, and they were disgusting. And I want to tell you how many times that my life has been threatened. I told you my life was threatened at the Fontainebleau, Miami Beach. My life was threatened in Times Square. My wife was almost punched out by a Mohammed hijab supporter outside Carnegie Hall.
Here's the thing. We can all agree that violence is unacceptable at any protest. But we should also all agree that the fundamental bedrock of a society, a democracy like America, is the free right to protest.
Peacefully.
Right? So the question then becomes, as Omar has said, whether this character, who was clearly leading the student protest, but was he directly endorsing or supporting Hamas? And I do think it's reasonable to ask that question, that does the government have evidence that he was actually supporting Hamas?
Fair question.
To me, If it does, it should present it, and then that to me would be absolutely fair
grounds for deportation.
I have evidence.
But if there's no evidence,
this is a
it
smear
will lead
built on
people.
top of
Well,
another
if
smear.
no evidence is produced, it does look like people will then say, "Well, where's the evidence?"
Well, Pierce,
and that doesn't work.
Pierce, what if he didn't support
Piers, I
Hamas?
have evidence
I don't know.
that
Let
Shmuley is
Aaron,
supporting Israel.
Aaron, sorry.
I have evidence that Rabbi Shmuley is supporting the terror state of Israel. Does that mean he should lose his rights? No, he has rights. So
You have
why should
evidence?
this student...
I want you to provide it. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, Israel is not a. It's not a
No, wait. You
My
just
point
said,
is-
wait,
my point
Aaron,
is
I'm giving you a
interview.
chance.
Well, no, I
to
can
reply
answer
me.
that question because Israel is not a prescribed terror group in the United States, so the analogy doesn't apply.
No, but
you might want it to, Aaron.
He's saying...
Aaron might want it to, but the reality is that one is a terror group prescribed in America and one isn't. So until that changes the law, is that if you were to endorse Hamas violence, that would be a crime. Yes. Finally, Omar, we got.
I still think that's free speech, actually.
Just last word. The smear against this one student is built on the other smear, which is that these protests are somehow anti-Semitic, when many of these protests are led by progressive Jewish voices, Jewish
but there was anti-Semitism amongst the protesters too. I saw it.
You have to be kidding. Jewish students were beaten up, spat on.
Some of those protests were,
but the double standard.
Some of them were definitely anti-Semitic. I saw it. So there's no question that.
Yes, but there's a double standard in that pro-Israel demonstrations where they attack. We've seen them on video at UCLA, in which pro-Israel
UCLA is the only example you can give. That's the only place where it happened.
Out of pro-Palestine protesters.
I think we should all support. We should all support the right to free protest, and in America it should be a bedrock. But if people openly support an illegal prescribed terror organization,
or engage in violence, like burn down the universities,
or engage in violence, then either of those things, if you're not an actual American citizen, there should be grounds for deportation.
Of which he's not
but I do think Omar's raised a good point. Let's see some evidence. Let's show the American people how this guy actually supported Hamas. Then it's a different argument. Without that, people will ask that very question with good reason. I've got to leave it there. It's been a very interesting debate. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Piers.
Appreciate it. Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask for only one simple thing. Hit subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And in return, we will continue our mission to inform, irritate and entertain. And we'll do it all for free. Independent, uncensored media has never been more critical, and we couldn't do it without you.